On this episode of the Innovative Schools podcast, we are talking with Joseph Cope about working in Title I schools, self-control, and creating a space for learning for every student, even those that give you a challenge. Come on, let's learn together. Hello, my name is Jordan, your host for this first episode of the Innovative Schools podcast. I'm so glad you could join us today. The goal of our podcast is to talk about teaching and educating, giving practical strategies and stories to empower, equip, and encourage every person who works in the school or education system. What you guys do is hard work, and we want to give you some just great resources and great inspiration to help you do your work even better. Today, we have responsibility-centered discipline master trainer Joseph Cope with us. Joseph, welcome.
Jordan, it's an honor to be here. I'm honored to be the first.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to, figure some things out as we go and have some great conversation. Joseph, can you tell us a little bit about what you've been a teacher, you are an RCD master trainer, you've done a lot of things in your career, but walk us through a little bit about your journey in education.
Well, I got into teaching because I wanted to make an impact. I remember thinking when I was in college, what am I going to do? And the truism of those who can do and those who can't, unfortunately, I wasn't an academic and I didn't feel like I could be very successful, but I did know that I was good at working with people. And so what better place to work with people and make an impact than in education? So I started in elementary school. I taught for 10 years in elementary school, and I found out pretty quickly that I had a knack for just connecting with people. The art of teaching came pretty naturally to me. What I had to learn was the science of teaching. And so after 10 years in education in elementary, I got to move my way up to middle school when we moved from one state to another. And then after 5 years teaching middle school English, I got to move into leadership and was in leadership for 3 years. And now here I am. I get to be a master trainer of responsibility-centered discipline, sharing with teachers around the country some of the things that made not just my classroom successful, but classrooms around the country are being made successful as well.
Yeah. What kind of schools were you kind of working in? Like when you started, where did you start when you were teaching?
Well, I have had the experience in the classroom of teaching only in Title I schools. And for the non-educators out there, a Title I school just indicates that there are funds that come from what's called Title I from the government to support because students tend to come from low income, poverty, and they're areas of high need within society. And so you can imagine the struggles that students come with every single day in a Title I school.
Yeah.
Title I schools are, in some places, are notorious where people look and go, oh, you teach there? And multiple schools where I had the opportunity to teach at, I would say where I taught, and some of my even teaching friends would go, oh, wow, how do you do that? Because some of the behaviors just almost feel outlandish, On my first week of school, I had a 4th grade kid tell me to F off under his breath. Welcome to education.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah, what do you do with that?
What are you supposed to do with a kid who tells you to F off? Until you start realizing, I got hired in January. The teacher who I took over for, if she wasn't walking on water, she was flying with angel wings. She was that good. And everybody at the school loved her, including my friend who missed her. And here's this stranger coming into the class, and he tells you to do something. It doesn't matter how engaging that lesson was. His response was, you're not Miss Stevens.
Yeah.
And his response under his breath was, F off, you're not Miss Stevens.
So you had big shoes to fill.
Jordan, the lady that I took over for was beloved at the school by staff and students alike. And to have to fill those shoes as a beginning teacher, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It was huge shoes to fill.
Mm-hmm. Now you started your first teaching kind of job gig was in Texas, right?
So I started teaching in California.
Oh, okay.
So for 10 years I was in California, and then in 2015 we moved to Texas, which is where I got the opportunity. And I say opportunity in air quotes, because some elementary teachers would say, how could you? But I did get the opportunity to broaden my experience and move into middle school. And once I got there, I fell in love.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Middle school for me was a rough time. So I can imagine, just being a student, even your favorite teacher's gone. You have this new young guy that who knows what he knows and if he's going to do anything. And on top of that, you're working in a Title I school, and so as a student, you can imagine the whole world being shaken up of like, how am I going to learn, or if I even care about learning at that point. I think we did some research just looking at where you were in Texas, and when you were there, that the district you were in, 78% of the students were low income.
The district where I taught just recently has become the largest urban district in West Texas. And the needs within the students was just vast. I mean, the school that I taught at was about 4 miles away from the county detention center, and it wasn't uncommon for my students to come in and say, my brother got locked up last night, or my dad's back in, or my mom got sent there last night. And when basic needs of human life aren't being met in a consistent way, forget trying to learn how to conjugate a verb, right?
Yeah.
Forget how to creatively write a 5-paragraph essay. Like, those kind of things don't even come across your mind. And all of the behaviors that come about as a way of avoiding the work or letting the teacher know and through a behavior that I am not at my best today. And those manifest themselves in large scale behaviors.
Yeah. So what were some, I mean, when you have kids coming in with those situations or from that, or for whenever it happened last night or last week, on top of just the normal pressures of being middle school in general, how did you approach helping students learn or just succeed in life at that point? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, unlike many teachers, I mean, like most teachers out there, I would say this is, you get into education because you have a heart for humanity. So the first thing you want to do is establish a sense of rapport.
Yeah.
The challenge is how do you not fall into the trap of becoming their friend because I have too big of a heart? And then when that doesn't work, then I get frustrated because now I need to give you some tough love. It's between tough love and trying to figure out how to get you to do the things. And when I started out teaching, one of my I wouldn't say it's my proudest moment, but for sure it's not my proudest moment. At the end of year 1, I remember my sweet girl, Jackie, at the end of the year, she wrote me a letter. She said, "Dear Mr. Cope, thank you for being the best teacher ever. Thank you for all of the movies and games we watched and played." And I thought to myself, is that the impact that I made on you? So by the end of 10 years of teaching, I had gone through trying to do all these things to establish rapport so kids loved being in my class. The hard thing became when you've got a student who walks in after lunch, highly agitated, emotionally dysregulated because something that took place in the middle school lunchroom, and now I have to sit there wondering, what am I doing? What am I going to do with this 7th grade girl who it very well could be her time of the month, not to mention the fact that there's all the things that have gone on in the lunchroom and she's cursing up a storm. She's directing it towards me. She's talking to anybody who she can who will listen. And what do? And I used to try to do the old like, hey, get yourself calmed down. Go take some time for yourself. Or I would do the, hey, what can I do for you? Let me help you. The hard part is I was always stuck either carrying too much weight because I cared too much or carrying too much weight because I didn't care enough. And I got stuck carrying just the weight of the world of all of these kids' needs on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I would take it home every single day. You know what, Jordan? It made me a really caring teacher, but it made me a really burned out teacher. I couldn't carry all that weight. I mean, you ask my wife.
Yeah.
Like, she's the one who would sometimes say, like, can we not talk about school tonight?
Yeah.
Or she would see me at the school for 12 hours on Saturday trying to prep lesson plans that were engaging so that my kids could have a good learning environment.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things that maybe we were talking earlier, you were saying that like coming out of school, you're taught to just make it an engaging enough lesson and the behavior problems will go away.
Listen, it's a truth, but it's not a full truth. right? Because the way that our brain is wired is we need to be engaged in something that we're interested in. You want to learn if it makes sense to you. And great teachers make great engaging lesson plans.
Yeah, some of my most favorite teachers, I remember back.
Right. Yeah, you remember the gamification of the lesson.
Yeah.
Like you remember the history.
I want those points.
Right. And you also remember the history teacher who told the great stories, or you actually got to be the person in history and all those great lessons that made it engaging. The problem is if you're in a level of survival in life, it doesn't matter how engaging a lesson plan is. That doesn't change the fact that I just broke up with my boyfriend and I'm really, really mad right now. I don't care if you spent 14 hours preparing this stupid game. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Right? The truth is engaging lesson plans matter. The truth that we also have to understand is if you're going to make those engaging lesson plans stick, you have to be able to give your students a place to land emotionally so that they feel like it's worthwhile to them.
Yeah. So what how quickly did you learn that? Did you learn that quick?
Well, you know what's funny is it probably wasn't until about maybe 10 or 11 years into my teaching career that I really started realizing I'm carrying too much weight. And I think one of the things, Jordan, that happened was I had my own kids. And I realized that I don't have as much bandwidth to give to the students like I used to before. There's other priorities in my life. And so now it became a conflict. And it came to the point where I started to realize I don't know how much longer I can do this unless something changes.
Yeah.
Unless I was thinking to myself, unless I landed the right school, right? Unless I moved to a place where there's no Title I kids, unless we move to a different location, or I get a better boss, or I get a better team. It was always something else on the outside that I was hoping that would change the burnout within me. And it wasn't. What you realize is, think about this. What makes a good teacher, right? A good teacher, obviously somebody who cares.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
For sure.
But in the science of teaching, you got to know your stuff. You got to know what you're teaching. Otherwise, you come across as incompetent. That's why you go to school, to learn what you're teaching. And then it's not just what you have to teach, it's how you teach it. You got to have those engaging lesson plans. And you also have to make sure that the kids know their stuff. So how are you going to go about assessing your kids to make sure that they know their stuff? But the third piece that rarely gets talked about in formal education is how do you manage your class? How do you handle student behavior? And there's some people out there who can do it pretty naturally. Yeah, it happens. But it never gets trained formally into you.
Yeah.
And so that was the realization that I had is I'm holding so much of this management piece within me, and I'm trying all of the things and little gizmos and gadgets and tricks and tokens and coins and punitive systems and clip ups and clip downs and all the things that I'm trying that I got told that would work. But eventually I'm running out of steam at the end of the day because I'm creating great lesson plans.
Yeah.
We're having good conversations in class, but I'm going home drained every day.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to take a small break. And when we come back from that, though, we're going to continue this conversation specifically looking at what are some of those things for classroom management that you discovered along the way to help some of the teachers and the educators that are listening. So hang out for a little bit, and we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to the Innovative Schools podcast. My name is Jordan. Again, we're here with Joseph Cope. And we just kind of finished talking about how school, when teachers go to school, they get their degree. There's really not a lot of training in classroom management. But you also said that teachers get into education because they have a heart for the students and for teaching. Is that why you got into teaching?
Without a doubt. I didn't know what else I could do in the world except connect with humans. I just knew I was good at that. And if I'm going to connect with humans, I want to connect with humans who are going to have an impact later on in life. What better way to connect and have an impact than to work with the future generation? And that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's great. We also talked about your time in Title I schools. And so thinking about the schools not preparing you for classroom management, and you're in Title I schools that you faced a lot of challenges and a lot of behavioral things. And so what you said it took 10 years for you to kind of figure out or have this realization of how to make the most impact. What happened at that 10-year mark?
Well, one is I moved from elementary to middle.
Yeah.
In elementary, when you're an elementary teacher, your outlook as a teacher is I'm really here to shape these lives, these young lives. Mm-hmm. And then you move to middle school, where all of a sudden they really have a voice of their own. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, they're pushing back on things you say.
I mean, I did.
We all do.
Yeah.
It's a stage in life. It's why middle school is the most awkward phase in life, because you're just discovering who you are. And these poor teachers who get put into middle school who have no training around how to work through that, they get stuck, right? Or they get burned out, or they get overinvested, and they just carry so much of that weight because it's so up and down. It's so emotional. Listen, Jordan, the first year that I was working at the middle school that I was working at that first year, within 2 weeks of the time that I was there, I was filling out a police report for assault with a weapon.
Wow.
You know what that weapon was?
In elementary school?
No, this is in middle school.
In middle school.
This is middle school.
Okay.
That weapon was my paper cutter. The paper cutter that just 3 months ago I had been using in elementary school for kids to help me cut things out. All of a sudden now that had been used as a weapon. One student all of a sudden decides that it would be a good idea to put his finger down, and another student, welcome to middle school, right?
Yeah.
And what do you do?
Why did you even have that in the classroom?
That's what my principal asked me.
Should have thought that one through a little bit.
I would have thought so, but I never would have thought it would be used. But here's the thing: that's like a big behavior.
Yeah.
Then you start getting driven crazy in a middle school setting when kids just don't stop talking, because no middle school kid doesn't have something to say. They always have something to say, right?
Yeah.
And they all have. And so now I'm used to being able to say, "All right, guys, settle down," and we settle down. Mm-hmm. And now I'm in middle school. All of a sudden, I say, "Okay, guys, settle down." And half the class settles down. And I'll look at the other half. Okay, guys, let's get settled down. It's time to go. A quarter settles down. And then I just have an eighth of my kids who just completely disregard me because they don't want to be there, because they don't want to do creative writing that day. I mean, what do you do? Like, I tried all the tricks. And that's the thing. I tried the things. And a lot of the thing is those tricks worked most of the time. Yeah.
But maybe, so I was talking to someone else in education. They're talking about their daughter was the teacher was trying to work on behavior things, and they had this whole system of if you did good, you moved up on the pegboard, and you could get, once you moved up to the highest, you could get a toy, but you got nothing for maintaining your behavior. So then the kid would start acting poorly to move back down the pegboard so they could move back up to then get another reward. And the teacher got upset at the student, but the parent of the student said, "Your system's broken. She's actually outsmarted your whole behavior classroom management system."
The way that the brain operates with motivation has actually nothing to do with rewards and punishment. When you're talking about what intrinsically motivates a human being, right? Teachers always talk about these words, intrinsic motivation. I have to intrinsically motivate my children. Mm-hmm. Well, intrinsic motivation doesn't come from being handed a $20 bill to do your work. Mm-hmm. Intrinsic motivation comes from a place of, do I get to choose for myself whether or not I can do it? Mm. Daniel Pink calls that autonomy in his book Drive. He calls it autonomy as it's the way that you choose for yourself what you want to do. And it's an innate need in all human beings. What teachers often mistake is teachers will often see a behavior as something disrespectful or wrong, when what we can really see is, what is the story that behavior is telling me about that child? Mm. And what is the skill that child is missing? And how is that behavior telling me that they're missing that skill? Let me tell you a quick example, right? I use this in some of the trainings that I give, which is I had a student in 7th grade. Her name was Ebby. She walks in after lunch, and she is hot with emotion. I mean, she is throwing F-bombs down. She's telling kids that she's going to kick somebody's A. She's calling kids B. And we all walk in, and we're thinking, like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, in that moment, the Joseph, the Mr. Cope of 10 years ago would have said, Ebby, come on, get yourself calmed down. Get outside. We can't have you do this.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment, though, once I had learned this skill of walking into a conversation with intention, I walked to Ebby and I looked at her and I said, girl, it sounds like you're really frustrated. You're really, really heated right now. What is it going to take for you to get to be your best self? Because I created a lesson today that had you in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're a writer and I want you to do the best, but it's going to take you getting to be your best for you to be able to participate in it today. I want you to do well. You want to do well. What's it going to take? But in that moment of rather than shaming her for the behavior, acknowledging the behavior, it just gave her that opportunity in that moment to ask herself, what do I need?
Yeah.
And she got to choose what it would take. Of course, in that situation, like there were a lot more F-bombs that were thrown.
Yeah.
There were more skills that had to be employed. But by the end of that conversation, Ebby was able to tell me that she needed 3 minutes to calm herself down.
Mm-hmm.
And when she came in after those 3 minutes, she had chosen 3 minutes. And so when she came back in, she was regulated and was able to get the work done and be successful.
Yeah. And she chose that.
And she
I mean, you
chose
supported
that.
her through that.
Absolutely.
You were there to help her kind of lift and figure out to get out of the lizard brain back into someone who can be rational.
People who care sometimes have to save themselves from themselves. Sometimes we're so good at doing something just innately that we forget that we're not the one that has to do the lifting.
Yeah. Great
Teachers can create a space for students to choose to change behavior for themselves.
So I'm in a classroom with 20, 25 students.
Yeah.
And maybe the majority of them are doing great.
Yeah.
But there's one or two that are not in that headspace. How do I, as a teacher, create that space you're just talking about for those students?
Well, before I tell you what I would do with those two students, I would say this, because I wouldn't be a good leader in education if I didn't say this. The environment that you set up in your classroom is going to dictate the level of success that you can attain to with your students. Because you have to have structures and procedures in place, because we also know that as much as we need autonomy as humans, we also need to know where the boundary is so we can choose when we come up against that boundary how we're going to react to it. That's just human nature. So when those boundaries are put in place, when the expectations are clearly set and routines have been established, when there are some students who, for whatever reason, choose to go with outside those boundaries or not meet those expectations, if Jordan and his buddy were messing around off in the corner, and all of a sudden I hear Jordan go, oh my gosh, something loud that totally disrupts the independent learning.
Yeah. Were you in my 4th grade class?
Were you my 4th grade kid? How did I know that you were Jordan? Are you the reason that Jordan gives me nightmares?
Probably.
But what I'm saying is I might walk over to Jordan and I would, rather than saying, Jordan, smarten up, get yourself together, because 4th grade Jordan hears that, and what does 4th grade Jordan do? Shuts down. Or Mr. Cope doesn't care. Or fine, I'll do it.
Or for me, I may on the outside say, okay, yeah. And then 3 seconds later, I'm complaining to all my friends about how mean or whatever Mr. Cope is.
And no matter how engaging that lesson was, you're just going to get it done for completion rather than engaging the spirit of that lesson.
Yeah.
So to create space for Jordan to choose change for himself, I might walk over to you and say, Jordan, looks like we got something funny going on. Like, you guys are clearly having a great time over there. I'm just wondering if we can take the energy that you got over there and can we put it into the work here? This assignment here, it's only going to take 10 minutes. Both of you are ridiculously smart. Let's get this through. in the next 10 minutes. And with the conversation that you have after that, let's just keep it at an inside voice so it doesn't distract the rest of it.
Yeah. You've successfully redirected, built in some kind of benefit, a little bit of expectations, and left me with dignity while still getting me into a position to learn and succeed.
I love that you use the word dignity because unintentionally, sometimes we, in a leader role, assume that our power has the ability, just the power has the ability to change someone. But when you can leave a conversation where both parties have a sense of, we're still human, you've left dignity intact on all fronts.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. What middle school kid, what human likes to get called out for their poor behavior? No one.
I can't think of one.
Even if I'm going 90 miles per hour down the freeway, and I get pulled over by a policeman, and I know that I've been going 90, I still feel wronged because in my mind, I was justified going 90 miles an hour.
Well, that guy was going 5 miles faster than me.
Yeah, exactly.
He passed me.
Yes, exactly. Or I might have been rushing to the hospital to meet my daughter.
Yeah.
Right? And so the point is that when we get called out or feel called out, we go into that survival mode, that lizard brain. So when a teacher or a leader has the capacity to recognize that's where you are, create the space for you to, I love that word that you use, still have a sense of dignity in walking away. I mean, Jordan, I can't tell you how many times a middle school boy has come over to me because they were making poor choices in the class. And by the time we finished a conversation, the kid looks at me and goes, thanks. Let me tell you what it looked like. I stop a kid in the hallway. The kid's slapping the kids' backs heads, right?
Yeah.
Hooting and hollering. I call the kid over. Hey, Jordan, come here. What's his first response? I didn't do nothing. What are you talking to me for? And I say, no, just come here. And I go, I saw what was going on down there. Between me and your next class, there's 8 adults who are going to see you do the same thing. Adults getting on your case gets you supercharged and annoyed. For you to get to class and be your best self, let's stay out of the adult's way. All it means is you just showing a little bit of self-control for the next 800 feet. Can you do that?
Yeah.
And the kid looks at me. This happened multiple times. The kid looks at me and goes, I didn't even think about that. Thanks. And what could have been a reprimand turned into the capacity for him to demonstrate self-control walking down the hallway.
And I'll tell you, self-control, that's another kind of word. You know, I think sometimes we position that, or I think of that word self-control and just maybe with food or, you know, something like that to benefit myself, which I think self-control ultimately can. But self-control also, in my opinion, is more than just that, but it's the ability to get things done that you need to get done. Or even like you're saying, you know, in the next 800 feet or whatever, have enough self-control. And even with my own daughter, I can see she's 7 and just sometimes she has a really hard time doing something or she doesn't want to do her schoolwork. And we talk about that self-control. I'm like, can you have self-control for the next 3 minutes? And then the next time we have a conversation, okay, for 4 minutes. And we just start building that up to help her build that muscle of self-control while also just seeing the benefit for herself of what she's working on.
Think about the results of self-control. The result, I mean, the behavioral folks out there will tell you that self-control is like a muscle. You just mentioned it, right? Like you got to use it for it to grow. So sometimes to be able to put a timepiece on it, can you show self-control for 2 minutes? That then becomes a benefit to them. They realize I could do it for 2 minutes. Maybe I can do it for 3.
Yeah.
Maybe I can do it for 5. But the result at the end is a human being says, I did that and I did it by myself.
Right.
And I did it for me. And in reflection, why is it that some students will come back and visit their teachers? Maybe it's because they were a fun teacher.
I'd never really thought about why I wanted to go back and see some of my teachers and not other ones.
Think about it. Some of them, it's because, you know, you had a good time in their class and they were your buddy and whatever. But the teachers that you respect the most and hold a deep space of gratitude for are the teachers who created the space for the real you to come out for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that was in behavior, whether that was in the grit that it took to get that paper done, the perseverance it took to do that research paper that you didn't want to do, but you ended up putting the work in. Or maybe it was just the fact that you were able to regulate your own emotions on your own thanks to that teacher. And now you can walk into an emotionally charged situation and say, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can walk up to another student who's in your face over something and you've learned the skill of saying, you're not worth my time. You're not worth it to me. And for a student at a Title I school to turn around and walk away and feel strong,
mm-hmm.
that's self-control. But think about the mastery that those kids are experiencing in terms of who they are and what they can do for themselves.
Yeah. Just the idea that maybe they've come into this, or I mean, this happens to all of us, of feeling like we can't do something. I was, this isn't necessarily education related, but we had a dead tree in our backyard that we had taken down, and I told them to leave the logs because we have a fire pit to split. And I had a friend who had never split wood before, and they wanted to come over and learn how to split wood, and she's working at this thing for a while, and she's like, I'm going to give up. I said, no. You need to accomplish something today. She'd been going through a couple, rough things recently. I said, you need to win. And when she got through that wood, when she got through it, and her whole face, her whole demeanor, she's like, you're right. I needed that win.
Mm.
And while she wasn't a master at wood splitting, she had that moment. And so even little moments like wood splitting, or in a school of being able to walk that 800 feet and not goof off and cause other adults to say things, or accomplish that paper, or just get one letter grade above on a test that you thought that you weren't going to do great on.
I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my daughter here.
Mm-hmm.
Just 2 weeks ago, not even that, a week ago, she got a new bed. So we picked it up, and she and I started building it together, and she started getting to, we put the frame together on the outside. And at a certain point, I just stepped back and said, okay, now it's your turn to finish. And so she had the little Allen wrench, and she put the slats together.
Yeah.
But whose bed is it? It's her bed.
Yeah.
She put it together. And there's times where parents or teachers will say, I'm proud of you, right? But there's other times that parents or teachers can say, I'm really proud of you, but you need to be proud of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when they go, I really am proud of myself, I did that by myself, that's when you create that sense of intrinsic motivation.
Mm-hmm.
If I can do that, then the next question is, what else can I do?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, how many kids do we know in education that if that was lit within them, how quickly would the world change?
Yeah, it'd be crazy. Well, we're almost out of time, but do you have one thing out of all the things that we've talked about, from classroom management, self-control, leaving them with dignity, what is one thing as we close out this first episode of the podcast that you would deeply encourage and hopefully motivate teachers to do right now in their classroom?
Jordan, what I would say is that the one thing that teachers could do more with is, don't just go into your conversations with your students from a place of heart. Go into your conversations with your students from a place of intention. And what I mean by that is, it takes skill to go into a conversation with intention.
Yeah.
That's the skill that I get to work with teachers and staffs around the country. Every week, I have the privilege of being in schools, training teachers in a skill. But that skill is the skill that changed my teaching profession.
Mm-hmm.
That skill of going in with intention, thinking to myself things like, how am I going to support this kid? What matters to this kid? What's the skill that's missing? What is this behavior trying to tell me? Those are all questions that I'm asking with intention to myself before I even go into this challenging moment conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We all have big hearts. That's why we're in education. But sometimes we just got to save ourselves from ourselves by protecting our heart with a level of skill so that we can go home every day with the same heart the next day.
Joseph, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and just sharing your experiences and the things that you learned working in Title I schools, your thoughts on self-control and how important that is to students, and just how we can, as educators, make a better space for all students to learn, even those that are maybe challenging to us sometimes. But so thank you for sharing all that with us. Joseph Cope kind of talked about a little bit about how you get to travel around the country and share what you've learned. Joseph does do professional development at schools and that kind of thing. If you're interested in that, we'll have a couple links in the show notes for you to possibly talk to him more about bringing him to your school to talk about those things. I hope everyone had a great time today. I did. I learned a lot. We look forward to learning more with you on the next episode of the Innovative Schools podcast. See y'all later.